So while I'm talking, you can work on going to that link with the QR code or with your computer, whichever makes you happiest. So I am Sarah Miller. For the purposes of today, I am your technology consultant. In real life, I'm assistant professor of Homeland Security and Emergency Management at Pierce College, a reservist with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, a small business owner for emergency management consulting, and some other things. I am an emergency management practitioner turned academic, and I am going to prep you for what's to come over the next 15 weeks or so. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself now or later?
I can introduce myself later.
Okay.
Also, you haven't started your...
No, I have not.
Okay.
I wanted to get everybody there first because I know that it depends on the audience. Sometimes it takes a little bit for everybody to get there. We're going to talk about technology today, and we're going to talk about how you can enhance and reshape emergency management capabilities, practice, and strategies by learning some very basic fundamental things. By the end of this term, you're going to apply these to some sort of case study. So with that, I am going to activate this poll. So you should be able to answer the poll now. And while you're not doing that, I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I didn't share correctly. There you go. Now it's active. Sorry, the Zoom button was covering it up. I thought I clicked it and I missed. And choose all of the things that you know how to do or that you have done. I'll take a minute, let people finish reading those. So it looks like everybody's mostly done clicking. I'm going to tell you, these are fascinating results to me. I have done this exact same survey with a group of executive level emergency managers. The highest percentage I got on any one of those categories was about 4%. No one knew how to do the other things. And that right there speaks to the gap that exists between your generation of emergency managers and mine or the one in front of me. There is a tremendous gap in knowledge, and yet we are using technology all of the time. And this points to the problem. This is why you're going to take a technology class, because not only do you have to learn these things, you have to convince other people to do stuff with them as well. So what we're going to talk about today is some of the benefits, some of the practical considerations, and some of the ethics behind using technology in emergency management. So who can benefit is really everybody. Emergency management professionals can benefit, first responders can benefit, and the public can benefit, but only if we do it well. If we do it wrong, we will harm people with technology. So the ability, if we do it well, the biggest benefit is the ability to save more lives and property. And those are always our primary focus: save lives, protect property. And we can do that better if we implement technology well. It helps us with increasing our situational awareness. If you're new to this field, you will quickly realize that one of the hardest things we do is keep track of what's going on in our emergency. And it is the biggest challenge we face, and technology can help us with that. Technology can help us with enhanced alert and warning. There are, just this morning, I live in Washington State. Just this morning, they rolled out the Shake Alert app for Washington State, which gives us early warning of earthquakes on my phone. And those early warnings can be enough seconds to save lives. Technology can help us better understand the risk around us. And by us, I mean all people. Technology can help us perceive the risk that we face and thus help us to take better action on it. And technology can give greater transparency to what we're doing. If you look at the last 2 years, the number of city council meetings that happened via Zoom, it was unprecedented. State laws didn't even allow it. And now city council meetings are much more accessible. Anybody can click on the Zoom and go to a city council meeting, which helps with transparency in government. The challenge, though, in technology, there are many, but this is the challenge you are going to face in this class. Understanding the actual needs of your organization or the organization you represent, understanding what's actually available to meet those needs, doing a gap analysis between what's available and what you want, creating accurate specifications. So it's great to say, oh, we want to do X, but do you know what that actually means? Finding the right vendors for these things, and then spending responsibly. One of the challenges you have is every vendor is going to tell you that their product is the very best for whatever problem you have. And if you haven't clearly defined your problem and you haven't clearly specified how you want to solve the problem, that means they're all right and they're all very wrong. And you are blindly spending money when you don't necessarily understand what it is you're trying to fix or what you're trying to do with it. And so in this class, you're going to learn basics of technology. And I'm going to touch on these and tell you why they are important. You are going to learn the basics of network technology and how it works. And that is important because everything we do anymore, technology-wise, is networked. It's networked via cables, it's networked via Wi-Fi, it's networked via data streams, it's networked and it talks to each other. And when devices talk to each other, it's great, but it also presents new challenges. It presents the challenge of cybersecurity incidents, either intentional or accidental. In a lot of cases, you don't know if a cybersecurity incident is intentional or accidental until you've figured out what the problem actually is. You just know nothing works. And so networks and Wi-Fi are an important piece of what we do. We use so many technologies that depend on them. And most of you, a chunk of, not most of you, about a fifth of you knew how to connect a device to Wi-Fi. Which is interesting because probably your laptops are connected to the Wi-Fi in the classroom. And I can see that people have laptops and tablets and devices. And you connected them to the Wi-Fi. That's how you're on the internet and engaging in this. So security is a huge piece of what happens in technology, or should. And it is often overlooked because the people who are buying products don't understand security. Sometimes the people selling the products don't necessarily understand security. And then you end up with holes, and those holes cause damage. They cause harm to other people. All you have to do is a quick Google search and you will find numerous instances of government entities going offline because they had a cybersecurity incident. I actually terminated a relationship with a bank first thing Monday morning because over the weekend when I tried to log in, their system wouldn't let me log in and was producing an error that contained everything necessary to log into their systems except their password. And that it was such an egregious security violation that I took all my money out and put it somewhere else. I'm getting less interest on it now, but at least I know it will still be there when I go to look for it. And it screamed of incompetence for that have remained in that state for more than 24 hours. Because someone didn't take security seriously at a bank, a big bank. And so security, you need to understand the implications of security. You don't have to be security specialists, but you need to understand how these systems affect you. If you have a security incident, what does that mean in your organization? A security incident I worked early in the pandemic, a city was attacked with ransomware and it took down all their systems. They had experts deal with the computer side of things, but they had to do things like send people out in a truck to look in the water reservoir and see how much water they had because they had no way to monitor it. They had good insurance. They had cybersecurity insurance. They were recovered in a week. Another jurisdiction that I worked with a little bit, kind of, but they didn't really want help. They were down for 3 months. So that was 3 months of time where people couldn't get their utility bills or pay their utility bills. among many other city services, because those people did not understand the basics of security or of planning or of response to a cyber incident. And so it's important that you understand the basics of that so that when you're looking to implement technology, you're incorporating that into your plan. Audio and visual production is a huge component of modern society, like TikTok, YouTube, videos that can go anywhere. But a large number of people don't know how to do that. And yet we connect with audiences and we get our message across by using those tools. And so when an organization doesn't know how to do that, that means they are losing the chunk of their audience that learns from watching videos, or that would learn if given the opportunity. Open source intelligence, that's OSINT, open source intelligence gathering, which for the most part is gathering up information using social media that people have freely shared. And you can learn a lot about people. You can learn a lot about your incident. It can be a critical piece of incident response. If we're in a large incident, imagine a tornado or a hurricane, and people are posting on social media because maybe they have Wi-Fi access, but they can't make a phone call. And so they're posting requests for help online. Those can be found and you can get them help. You can also get a sense of communications failures. When the volcano in Tonga erupted, very early on, there was video coming out of Tonga, and then it went down as they lost communications infrastructure, as the underwater cables to the island were severed because of the incident. But you could learn from that, like the outside world could learn what was going on in Tonga based on what people were putting on social media, and an international response was able to be started based on initial information. GIS and mapping has become a core of what we do. You might not become GIS experts, but you certainly need to know how it works. You need to understand the basics of making a map, and of what kind of data can be plotted on that map. One of the things that you will find is you can glean incredible information about who is going to be impacted by a disaster if you're using GIS software and good data. And there's lots of data out there. You can map where your most vulnerable people are. Sensor data is something that we use a lot of. I noted that we have the earthquake early warning system now in the Shake app. That comes from sensor data. There's earthquake sensors all over. When they trigger above a certain point, it sends an alert, which apparently will make my phone buzz and beep and things. That's how it's supposed to work. Hasn't happened yet, which is good. But sensor data is everywhere. You watch unmanned aerial systems fly over wildfires with infrared sensors, and they can detect hotspots. They can detect people as well who might need rescue. There's so much you can do with sensor data. I mentioned the water reservoir. There's a sensor in that water reservoir that reports data out on the status of the reservoir. If you can't access it, that's why they had to send a guy in a truck out to look. And so sensor data is all around us, and we can gather tremendous information from it. There's a lot of things are connected to the internet now and are all producing data, which means they're also producing data about you. And you need to be mindful of that. As you work in this field, you need to know what is out there about you. If you're going to work in the public sector, you need to know what other people can find about you and whether you're okay with that. Hazard modeling has advanced tremendously with the use of technology. We can model hazards and the impact of specific hazards in specific areas. There's even some trial stuff going on with artificial intelligence that would tell us, based on the data we already have about people who are vulnerable and the data we have about a particular incident, say an earthquake, we know where to send resources first because we know where the biggest impacts are going to be based on building permits and the types of buildings that are there. We know where we will need to send resources without even looking. Obviously, we want to use our eyeballs on it eventually, but we know where we can do the most good initially based on data and hazard modeling, which feed into decision support systems. So decision support systems are things that take information from a variety of sources and help you organize it and catalog it. We're starting to see artificial intelligence used in this. I'm actually working on a project that is using artificial intelligence to support decision making but taking into special account, it's an equitable model. So it's taking into special account people of color, people who are low income, people who are vulnerable in some way, who historically get left out of disaster. If you read through the sociology literature on disaster, you will see that historically the exact same groups of people get left out every single time. And it's up to us to make that stop. And we have the ability to do it. We just have to figure out how to use that. One of the things you have to learn how to do is to write a business case to justify acquisition of technology and to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Business cases are important for anything, but particularly for technology, because typically with technology, you're asking somebody to fork over a lot of money for the thing that you want. And then finally, networking with other humans. This is a technology class, but ultimately, technology is used to connect humans with each other. And so learning about technology it requires you to interact with other humans and to learn more about it and to find specializations, to find people who know specific things. And that's what you're going to see over the next 5 weeks or 15 weeks, roughly, is your professor's network of people and the people they know coming in as subject matter experts to talk to you about all of these various topics in more detail. This is what you're going to look at, and this is what you're going to learn. I'm going to touch briefly on emerging technology. I love emerging technology, but this is going to be a very brief overview because you have to learn the basics as well as what's coming. So for our purposes, emerging technology is technology that's available but not widely understood or adopted by the emergency management committee or by community. By that standard, YouTube might qualify as emerging technology in emergency management because almost no one in the executive leadership class that I taught knew how to make a video and put it on social media. However, we're not going to consider YouTube to be emerging technology. But that tells you how far behind emergency management is when it comes to technology. We're very, very far behind in some areas. So this is a laundry list of things that you might encounter in emerging technology. I talked a little bit about artificial intelligence. There's more out there. Virtual reality has the potential, virtual and augmented reality both. Virtual reality has the ability to help people perceive risk by putting them in an environment with goggles on their head and letting them experience a disaster. That can change people's minds and help them make better choices about survival. Augmented reality is something we use all of the time. People don't think about it as augmented reality, but anyone who's watched a football game in recent memory sees that the stripes that the TV broadcasters put on the field, those aren't real stripes. That's augmented reality. It's showing you where the first down line is in a way that doesn't actually exist in real life, and that's augmented reality. It's the backup cameras in your cars that have the lines that show you before you crash into something. And Nick is tormenting me there because he's making fun of what we called the glow puck in hockey games because he knows I'm a hockey fan. We hated the glow puck, just for the record. We hated it. My mom loved it because she could never keep track of it until it glowed, and then she could keep track of it. So there's a purpose, that there's a business case for every product that wants to be sold. But augmented reality can really help us in emergencies. If you've ever at some point, you will experience an area that has been hit by a disaster. All the street signs are gone. All of the stop signs are gone. All of the landmarks might be gone. And with augmented reality, you can pull up a map and see what was there. And it can help you figure out where you are, among other things, but also help you understand what has happened in a better way. Mesh networks. Nick and I just had a discussion about mesh networks, but the ability of networks to talk to each other in small ways. So we might be able to get a bunch of devices together. They might network together and we could use them even if we don't have access to the internet. Self-driving cars, they're everywhere now. And they do dumb things sometimes, but they also have the ability in a disaster, for instance, to evacuate people who can't drive. If you could harness people with self-driving cars and send them to the person's house who can't drive, suddenly they can evacuate in a way that they couldn't previously. 3D printing they're 3D printing houses now. And that has the ability to really enhance recovery. If you can rapidly construct houses, it's helpful, especially with some of the issues we have with being able to buy building materials even now. You've got nanotech, so very micro technology that can be used for a wide variety of applications. Granular imagery and GIS. So some of the first things we knew about the Tonga volcano and the destruction came from satellite imagery that was so detailed, it was like you were standing there. And that can very much help us in a disaster because we don't necessarily have to be at the location to see what's wrong. Unmanned aerial systems, whatever you want to call them, drones, people call them drones, have a lot of use in technology, and that borders on being basic technology versus emerging technology. We're still barely touching the surface of what they can do, but more and more agencies have adopted them for various things. Cryptography, and we're not talking about the crypto bros and cryptocurrency. We're talking about actual cryptography that is used to create blockchain. And blockchain for us can be a game changer in how disaster contracts are done. We're not talking about exchanging money. We're talking about the tracking mechanism by which paperwork can be done. The recovery process is full of paperwork. And it might be that it can be handled far more efficiently using blockchain, which guarantees that it's not messed with, that it follows a certain chain, it can automate approvals, but we're very much not there yet. We've got the Internet of Things. We're all using them. We all have stuff that's connected to the internet, but that can be useful in gathering data that we can use. If we are experiencing a disaster, if we think we're going to experience a disaster, I'll tell you one of the coolest things about the Tonga volcano is there's people all over the world who have weather stations mounted to their garages and their roofs and out in their fields. And all of us with weather stations were able to look at our weather stations and the barometric pressure readings and see when the shock wave from that volcano passed over our own homes all around the world, the first and the second shock wave in many places. And that's part of the Internet of Things. That data is being reported by people who are just broadcasting their weather stations on the internet, and that can be harvested. You've got location and tracking technology. Some of that's not an emerging technology. Some of it can be used as emerging technology. Big data is the thing. Big data is, there's so much data out there that we do nothing with, that we could learn a lot from if we analyzed it correctly. And we don't in emergency management typically have people who are big data experts who actually do something useful. Because data is just a pile of stuff. You have to analyze it and turn it into actionable, I'll use the word actionable intelligence. So there's a process by which you gather data, you process it or analyze it, and you turn it into something useful that you can do something with. And we don't do that enough. We tend to not be a data-driven profession. We tend to be this feels right kind of profession. Instead of using the data that is surrounding us to make decisions, we're just not. And part of that is because the current generations of emergency managers don't necessarily understand what data is out there, nor do they understand what they can do with it and how they can harness it. And finally, then open source intelligence. This has been part of the intelligence community for a long time. But when we start to incorporate it into emergency management, we're able to make better decisions. We're able to have better situational awareness. We're able to better track things that might cause us harm in the future or cause us harm now. We might even be able to stop things. And so that's where technology is going. Some of it you can see already in place, and some of it is coming slowly. I'm going to play this video. It's brief, but I think it's really good to talk about how innovation can work.
Unfortunately, we are entering an era where extreme weather events will become ever more frequent. In a world that is going to be affected by climate change, we need to get better at how we're responding to these disasters.
The purpose of the Safe Steps DTech Awards is to create a focus on a new technology category, disaster technology, to bring the same type of intensity and energy and enthusiasm that innovators and venture capitalists and business people, NGOs have brought to other kinds of technology, fintech, edtech, medtech, etc., but to bring that to technology that will make disasters less disastrous and save lives.
So some of the things that we have seen over recent years is the use of drones to assess disaster damage, the ability to reach hard to access communities who otherwise cannot reach hospitals themselves through telemedicine is already saving lives.
SafeStep DTech Awards provides a great platform to budding and talented for-profit and not-for-profit organizations to showcase how technology can make a difference in mitigating disasters and natural calamities.
There is no way a single agency, even one as big as the International Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement, can meet all of those needs.
It is our collective responsibility to harness technology for good. I want to see innovation to continue. I want to see this partnership to continue. And with this initiatives like this, I do strongly believe that the future is absolutely in good hands.
So I want to thank the Prudence Foundation and all the other partners that have been involved in making the SafeStep competition happen, to thank and congratulate all the participants.
And we hope that together we can make disaster tech a category that attracts many more innovators and brings much more financial support for making the world a safer place. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to skip the exciting music. I'll put that link in there because you really should go look at the awards that they've given in the last couple of years, because they're pretty phenomenal. Like, people are doing cool stuff in this realm. So this is Everett's diffusion of innovations, and this is just a brief visual of how technology gets adopted pretty universally. This was originally a communications theory, but it really applies to technology. You can look at it and see it. So when a new technology comes out, there's about 2.5% of the people are like, yes, I want every cool new thing, and they get it. They've had it. And then there's the early adopters. Early adopters are your friends who always have the really cool stuff and know how to use it already. Then you've got this early majority, which is about 1/3 of the people. So then you've got, after that, the late majority, and then the laggards. The laggards are the people who are still using BlackBerries. I always pick on the BlackBerry users because it's really old technology at this point. Yes, there are some that are now Google devices, but the reality is a very small number of people are innovators. They're the people who have piles of dead technology in their closet. I say this as a person who has piles of dead technology in a closet in the basement that we bought that was cool, that was never got to this early majority and no longer exists. People don't use it anymore. You can't buy things for it. It doesn't exist. But you see this in disaster, in emergency management as well. Emergency management and government tend to overall be out here in the late majority and laggards by and large. There are few, besides the military, government is rarely in this front half of this curve. They're always on the back half, which means that just by default, if you're in government emergency management, you're behind. And that's a hard place for us to be, because we could be doing better work if we access what was available to us. So some of the things you have to think about in adoption of technology is, how do you decide what technology your organization is going to adopt, and when are you going to do it? You can't be early adopters. Government cannot afford to waste money on stuff that is never going to come to fruition. But can you always afford to be laggards? No, probably not. I look at organizations that are emergency management organizations that are not actively engaged in social media at this point. They are the laggards of the laggards, and they don't have effective ways to talk to their communities necessarily. And you have to think about how you access technology on the fly during an emergency. You may have an emergency and you may need to access something you've never used before, but suddenly you have a use case for. So there's a lot of barriers and issues around this, reliability, ethical issues, security we talked about, policies. You have to have policies for this. When I worked for city government, somebody decided to finally, we needed a drone policy. And then they discovered that like 4 different city departments had already gone out and bought themselves drones and were flying them around. They didn't have licenses for them. There was no control over it. So they literally grounded the city drone program, wrote a policy, got everybody their training, and then let them start flying again. But part of it was public perception, because of course the cops bought a black drone, which is it's a very threatening looking drone. When you see it buzzing around the sky, a white drone is much less threatening. So it's the public perception of technology as well. A lot of times we reinvent the wheel. I can't tell you how many times somebody tells me their good idea about technology and it's literally something that already exists. They just didn't look. They didn't use their networks before they spent a lot of time developing a thing that already exists. We lack scope. We're like, yeah, we need to be on social media. That's what my mayor told me. That's not a scope. That's something else. But everybody ran out and got on social media, and then we didn't know what we were doing. Why did we have social media? What were we doing with it? Did we have policy? No. And so we didn't have scope for that project. What's the cost? It can be very expensive, and you just might not have the funds. It might not be easy to use. If you implement technology and nobody can use it, you're going to have issues. I used to work for a police department, and we rolled out a new computer-aided dispatch system and report system. It required everybody to type. Within about 2 months, there were a bunch of officers who were on report because the reports were so late. And when they were finally asked why their reports were so late, they didn't know how to type. They were old school. They had written their reports by hand their entire lives. They'd never learned to type. And they had to sign up a bunch of cops for typing class at the community college because they couldn't write their reports. So it seemed like a good idea, but they missed that lack of scope. They didn't do a good business case. And suddenly it cost them more money, and it got people in trouble who were embarrassed to say, yeah, I don't know how to type. Can you send me to typing school? And so they didn't. And we create solutions sometimes that are unsustainable. You might buy a fancy thing, but if you don't have the money to continue making it work, it dies, and now you have a closet full of dead technology. I strongly encourage you, if you get a chance, to read The Ethics of Disaster by Naomi Zak. These ethical considerations come from her book, but I've adopted them to technology. But solutions that are not equitable, which means you have to understand what equity is. Solutions that don't ensure safety and security. We can make all kinds of great solutions, but if they're not focused on safety and security, they probably don't belong in our toolkit. Solutions that don't address an articulated need. So many times people are like, yeah, I created a really cool thing. Okay, so who needs that thing? Well, I don't know. I was hoping you could tell me. Well, that's not how it works. I mean, it can work that way. But if you can't articulate that need, why are you buying technology to solve that need? And this last one, who is not being served by your solution? We've seen that a lot with the pandemic and people going to remote learning in places that don't have broadband access. So the only way you can go to school is if you can be on the internet, and they don't have broadband access. The only way you could go to the doctor was to do it by telemedicine in communities that don't have broadband access. This failure cost people, I don't know that it cost people lives, but it certainly was an inequitable solution that someone needed to have figured out a way to work around, because you have to ask yourself, who isn't served by my solution? Any questions on that before I turn it over to Nick?